Hello, folks. This is Andrew Gilmore with another episode of Mostly Movies, Maybe Music. And we're focusing on music today because I have two very talented musicians with me. And uh, where can I start? Well, they are the founders of a group called Miss Mayebell and her Ragtime Romeos. And they perform songs from the 1890s through the 1920s. And you might guess from the big shelf full of 78s behind me that that's right up my alley. So when I started doing this show, I knew that I wanted to have them on. And we've actually never met until about a minute ago, actually. But I reached out to them on Facebook, and they were very nice about accepting my invitation to be here. And well, they've been very busy. They've been on the road for a while, so it took a little extra work to get them on. But I should mention also that they have a YouTube channel. If you just type in Miss Maybell on YouTube, you'll see they have over 100 videos of performances that they've done. And I discovered their channel a couple of years ago and really got hooked on their stuff. They have a lot of wonderful performances on there. So I'm a fan, and finally, as a fan, I get the pleasure of meeting these folks. And in spite of their busy schedule, they were nice enough to give me some time today. So I should introduce them. I haven't said their names yet, but we have Miss Maybell herself, otherwise known as Lauren Sansaricq, and her husband, who is Charlie Judkins, otherwise known as Charlie Judkins, strangely enough. And so I want to thank you both for being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm
Well, thank you
honored.
for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on today.
Well, it's my pleasure. So let's just start by talking about the tour. I know you've been on the road for about a month now, so what kind of response are you getting from the audiences?
Well,
Um,
we actually haven't been traveling. We've mostly just been busy, mostly just doing our gigs around the city. We played a phonograph show in Pennsylvania just a few weeks ago,
mhm.
and that was pretty
And we're going to be back in Pennsylvania at the end
for
of
a
the
benefit
month.
concert at the end of the month. Last year we did a little tour out to Michigan to play the Ragtime Extravaganza out there, which the River Raisin Ragtime Ensemble helps put together, and we did a couple little stops in Cleveland and things like that. And it's always interesting to be on the road. It's interesting to see how people react to our music live in other little states and towns as compared to New York City. People are always pretty nice in New York City, but I think that New York City is so stimulating and it's kind of overwhelmed with live entertainment that you can see of all kinds and kind of just a lot of noise and excitement in general that sometimes I almost feel like people are extra receptive when you get a little bit outside the city, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. It's pluses and minuses. I think, New York is obviously a very cosmopolitan audience, whereas so there's like little differences, but yeah, I mean it's always fun to get out there and travel with our music. It feels like we're spreading the word, about what we're doing, and that's important to us.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to add that I'm in Philadelphia, so I'm just a little bit too far away from where you've been playing. But if you ever come a little closer to Philly, then I'll definitely come see you.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
sure.
that would be
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah. We've been meaning to get out to Philly. Absolutely. I love Philly. And we're always in Pennsylvania, but not Philly so far.
Yeah, you're just a little too far away. It would have been like a 3 hour round trip for me this time
Right.
around.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was reading about you, and I read that you've also played in Europe, so I'm sure you have some stories there.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we've played in Europe twice so far. We're hoping to go back soon. The first time we played on the south of Spain for a Sevilla swing, which was a really nice little thing. We traveled with our bass player, Brian Nalepka, who's a great guy and a very seasoned bass player who's been playing jazz in New York City steady since the 70s. He's worked with all kinds of great famous people, Dina Martin, Tommy Tune, Leon Redbone, all these great people. And it was great to travel with Brian and his wife Mary, and yeah, our little trio was very well received in Sevilla. I think they're mostly used to swing music there. I don't think they really heard early jazz or ragtime too much. And
Right.
yeah, they it was funny. I would go off the stage and they kept wanting an encore. And I think at one point I went back on to get some instruments we left behind, and they thought we were coming out to do another song, and they all started going crazy again. So yeah,
They were really into it. And
yeah.
this was a huge festival. There was like 600 over like 600 people
Oh,
there.
and another funny thing about that was there was some massive soccer or football game, as they call it in Spain, going on while we were performing that day. So there were not only hundreds of people in the theater we were performing at, but there were hundreds and hundreds of people marching through the city in football face paint, basically shutting the whole city down. So there's a lot of hoopla that day.
And this was in Sevilla, Spain,
Yeah,
and it was really
I
fun.
think they hadn't been in wherever this cup was in decades or something like
Hmm.
that. So it was kind of a big deal. So it was an exciting night between our concert and all that going on. Thankfully, they won, or they probably would have trashed our hotel in the city.
Yeah.
The second time we went out there was a great, great place in where was it
Bern,
in Bern,
Switzerland.
Switzerland. That's right, called Marion's Jazz Room, and that place has been there at least since the 70s, 80s, I think. And they'd had really all kinds of legends playing there since it opened. And yeah, it's just a really great place. It's family run. The owner, Hans, himself was a trumpet player when he was younger. He recorded with Bud Freeman and a lot of other great American jazz musicians. He inherited a lot of memorabilia from Eddie Condon's club, which he has up on display at Marion's. And yeah, it's just an amazing place to, if you're really into jazz, you can go spend a week or a few days at Marion's, and they have a different band in residency every week, usually people from the US. So they brought our band with Brian and Dan Levinson and Andy Stein out for a week of shows, and we just played there 2 shows a night for a week. And in exchange, they, paid us very well and put us
It
up.
was almost exhausting, I will
Oh,
say,
yeah, but
because
in
it
a
was
very
two
fun
shows.
way.
Yeah, it was exhausting, but in a fun way. It was like two shows a night. And like, at least personally, we actually do multiple gigs a day sometimes, and it is exhausting, but it can be more exhausting to do listening rooms twice because, it's very everything you do is very accountable.
Right.
It's like, everyone can hear every nuance of what you're doing. So you really
Sure.
got to be 100% on. And when you do two of those shows a night, it's a
Right.
lot of pressure. A
And
different repertoire, obviously.
right. And also to mention, these people in Switzerland, English obviously is not their first language, but it's also a listening room. We're not background. So we have to really engage with these people, but we
Hmm.
also, we have to be as clear as we possibly can because, again, these people don't speak English as a first language. So that was a really fun challenge. And
Yeah, it was fun
yeah,
challenge.
we hope to be back at some point.
Yeah, well, it's all interesting. I've never been to Europe myself, so it's all kind of
Oh
exotic
wow,
to
you
me.
gotta go. You gotta go.
Yeah, well, there are issues with that, but anyway, we're here to talk about you and not me. So, uh, anyway, I guess one of the other questions I wanted to ask you about touring is just I was thinking about how maybe some of the people that come to your shows are people like myself who are record collectors and are familiar with that world of old music, but I imagine that most of the people coming to see you are probably, they don't live in that world and they're just coming to see a show and maybe don't have as much context. So,
Yeah.
what kind of response do you get from people who are hearing that music for the first time and maybe aren't as familiar with it?
I mean, honestly, I would say most shows we do in New York, I would say most times we do shows in New York, most of the audience members are not die-hard fans of ragtime. They might not even know what ragtime is. So we're actually very used to having to introduce people to our music on a very rudimentary level. And then, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's kind of a fun challenge. Again, talking about challenges, it's a fun challenge to yeah, to kind of like give them just like a very nice kind of introduction, like what is this music? How did it come about?
Where did it
The
come?
history of it. I find it really fun to do that actually.
Oh, me
I
too.
mean, I love both sides of the coin. I love playing when we're playing at ragtime festivals and everybody knows about ragtime. That's honestly, that's almost the most fun.
Right.
But it can be also really fun to kind of just explain things in a really simple way to help them get acclimated to what this music is, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. And it really helps to be, when we're performing in our, hometown of New York City anyway, it definitely helps that Tin Pan Alley was here
Hmm.
on 28th Street, and we're often playing gigs in that area, so we can tell people, you're hearing music that was all written and composed and popularized like a couple blocks away from where you're hearing it now, just a little over a century ago.
Right.
So I think people like that it's local history, whether they're New Yorkers themselves or tourists. I think bringing it into the greater scheme of being part of the city history definitely helps. It's something I can tell
Hmm.
people latch on to and take interest in.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
I do.
it's a very interesting thing. It is an interesting thing. I wish more there was more knowledge of ragtime. I mean, I will be honest,
Right.
like I'm saying, I love to be able to teach people or help people get acclimated to what this music is, but personally, I do wish more people knew about ragtime because most people, even if we're lucky, they even know about Scott Joplin.
Right.
Sometimes people don't
Right.
even know who Scott Joplin is. They don't know. A lot of people will say something like, play the song from The Sting. They don't
Right.
even know it's Scott
Or the ice
Joplin.
cream song,
Or the ice cream
as it's
song.
also known.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny
Play
how
the Sting.
I wish, maybe there was more awareness of our American musical history.
Sure. Yeah, I can relate because I teach film history for a living, and I show a lot of obscure movies, a lot of pre-code stuff, and that kind of thing. And my students generally like they know Casablanca and The Wizard of Oz, and that's about it. So
Mm,
I have to do that much
yeah,
more work to dig deeper.
right.
So
Right, exactly. And it's a very rewarding feeling when I get somebody at our shows who's really enjoying it, and either they tell me or I can just get the feeling that this is just a completely new music to them in every way, and just seeing them even giving all the biases of, the music they might know the best from contemporary radio or Spotify or whatever, even despite that, they hear ragtime and just really enjoy it naturally. It's a really comforting feeling to know that
Oh,
you're
for sure.
bringing this
I
music to a
mean,
new
that's
generation of
that's
fans.
why we do what we do,
yes,
and it is very gratifying. And yeah, and that's why we've been kind of interested in the unrecorded songs. Um,
yeah,
Project we've been working towards.
yeah.
yeah. I think I guess all three of us are keeping history alive, and that's very important.
Mhm.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what my next question was. Oh, just one of the things that I think is interesting about you is, I'm 38 and I've been collecting 78 since I was a teenager, and then I found out that you guys are younger than me, which is a little strange to me. But do you find that there are a lot of younger people around our age who are interested in vintage music, or is that a pretty small group, do you think?
There's some people coming up. We play a lot with Gavin Rice. Um, he plays banjo in our band sometimes, and he's young. He's like 21 or 22. There's, Colin Hancock, who leads bands and plays trumpet and lots of things. I think there is a younger generation.
Right. I think the internet helps with that a lot
Yeah, I
because
do.
I'm just old enough that, I mean, they had the internet when I was a kid, but it was really like in its infancy. And, when I found out about 78s and things like that, and cylinder and ragtime music, it was kind of a hard thing to get into at first. Like my dad,
Mhm.
luckily, was a record collector, but even still, he only had so much, and he wasn't a sheet music collector. So
Mhm.
if I wanted to, I used to just basically from the time I was in like middle school, high school, I would scour flea markets and yard sales and things like that, and even like really obvious 78s or sheet music or things like that, seemed
It's
like,
hard.
and
Yeah.
well, even, they seemed like treasures to me just because it was, again, the internet was in its infancy. There was no
Hmm.
YouTube yet. So really it was, if you wanted to get into early music, you had to kind of go out into the world and collect it on your own or try to find people in
Hmm.
person
Hmm.
that knew about it, which used to be a lot harder. The people that are coming up now and are in college or high school
They had
now.
a phone in front of them since they were a little kid. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
Yeah,
it's
it's easier.
easier,
Yeah,
to
it's
find the
just
music. But
yeah.
I do think, one could debate though. I mean, they have the accessibility to it, but
Mhm.
maybe the way that we got into it, which was a little more of a physical manner,
Yeah.
like I went to a school, I went to a Waldorf school. There was very little technology, so like I just like there was like no computers in like on my school in my house. So I would find a lot of things at antique shops. That's where I found my first records in antique shops, you know. And to this day, that's how I'm finding my songs and my records a lot of times. I mean, yeah, I go on eBay. But I do think the you know collecting things physically and like the way we got or finding songs and through our parents or what have you. I think that's an
Right.
intimate thing, which I think is
Oh yeah.
special. You know,
Another
I won't deny
yeah.
that that's
Another
special.
thing I can say too, when I was first getting interested in this music in high school, there was a lot of ragtime sheet music that had already been scanned online, but there wasn't really a lot of recordings of people playing it publicly available or even MIDI files. Like now, most obscure rags, you know, you can find some kind of a MIDI file somebody made, even if there's not a real performance of it. But when I was in high school, kind of all you had were sheet music archives. So if you wanted to hear what something sounded like, I still had to learn it myself. And, you know, I was only starting on piano in those days, so it took me a really long time to learn. So I
Mm-hmm.
really had to put in a lot of, you know, sweat and hours to just to hear what something sounded like, you know. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's, you know, I don't know. It's easier now if you want to hear what something sounds like, find a MIDI file of it or something, and you might hear right away, oh, I'm not that interested, you know. So
Mm.
yeah, times have changed, maybe for the better.
Yeah. Just something I forgot to mention in my introduction, which is that this is the first time that I've had two people on at the same time. So
Wow.
that's working. Acoustically, it's working so far, and I guess that's
Good.
because you're in the same room. That helps.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, up to now I've just had solo guests, so it's nice to have more than one person giving some input. So that helps. Anyway, that's just parenthetical. But yeah, I think well, you mentioned record collecting, and you sort of alluded to how you got started on all of this. But what interested me is, you know, I discovered your channel because you were doing Clarice Vance songs, and I thought,
Oh yeah.
who else is doing Clarice Vance songs these days? So then I looked at your videos, and oh yeah, that's an Arthur Cohen song, and here's a Lee Morse song, and this and that, and you know, I've been listening to that stuff for years, and I guess, as I say, I don't think a lot of people our age know those people, but how did you progress from, you know, just collecting old records to finding some of those more obscure artists?
I mean, I think it kind of goes hand in hand to me. I mean, you know, it's kind of like if you're a chef or a cook and you go out to a meal and you have like a delicious meal and you're like, oh, but if you're a cook, you're gonna think to yourself, well, how do I make that at home? You know, so I'm kind of the same way with songs. If I hear a great song, a great recording, I appreciate the recording and I don't always mind just appreciating the recording, but sometimes I think to myself, oh, it's such a great song, I gotta learn it.
Right.
And so it kind of goes hand in hand. If you're a
Yeah.
musician, most musicians would get that, is if you fall in love with a song, you kind of want to learn it.
Yeah. It's
You
well, it's
know what I
also kind of
mean?
like being an aspiring magician and you see another magician and you're like,
Trick.
you have to
Yeah.
know how the trick works. And I can one of my big things I can remember probably being around like a freshman in high school, maybe a senior in middle school. And I remember hearing Jelly Roll Morton for the first time. And it was the Alan Lomax recording of him playing King Porter Stomp. And he just plays it with like a real laid back, groovy feeling, just like stomping his foot. And I remember just for like probably 2 hours after I heard that recording, I was just standing around in gym class in high school. I'd heard it in the morning on the way to school. And I remember just thinking, how does he do that? You know, if I could
Right.
do that, that would just be the coolest possible thing I could do with my
Hmm.
life. If I could just figure out how to play piano just like that, you know, I wanted to know how the trick worked, basically.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
I guess since I'm sharing a little bit about myself here, I guess you guys know Michael Camella, right?
Oh,
Oh yeah,
sure,
Yeah.
he
yeah.
played, he DJ'd at our wedding.
Oh, great. Yeah, he's an old friend of mine. I've known him since I was 16, and
Oh, he's a great
yeah,
guy.
yeah, I had him on the show recently. He was here, and yeah, I got started listening to his radio show when I was in high school, and that's how I got started listening to old records, and then started collecting them myself. So all that stuff back there that's all his fault.
Wow, yeah, that's great. I was one of the one again. My father was a record collector and still is. There used to be a show on WFMU. I think it was called the Mechanical Antique Music Program or something
Yeah.
of that nature. And I can still remember hearing that on the radio. I'd never heard Cylinders before, and I heard Kel Stewart, Uncle Josh come on one afternoon, and I was just like, "Wow, what is this?" And I was hooked right
Mm-hmm.
away. I had to hear the show every week, and I don't think I saw or heard Cylinders in person from a real phonograph for at least several years after that. But it was just a very interesting. It grabbed me right away. Like, wow, I'd never heard what recorded music of this time sounded like. And then when I started to hear things that were more musical, which I think was from great public services like the Internet Archive. I
Yep.
can remember I had an animation studio job in college, and I was listening to people like Arthur Collins and Len Spencer all day on the
Yep.
Internet Archive. And I can even remember my coworkers stopping me because they could hear a little bit through my headphones, and they were just like, "I'm sorry, what are you listening to?"
Yep.
It was just it was a strange experience for people who had never heard that stuff before.
Yeah, I remember trying to play some of that stuff for my friends in high school, and it was, I guess, the same reaction. They just went, "What the hell is this? I don't understand what this is." So I
Like
had to just,
Martian music or something.
yeah, I had to just listen to it myself, and that was about it. So I also just, for the audience out there, I wanted to address the fact that you're also both visual artists. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sure.
mean, Charlie went to Pratt.
That's right.
He studied animation.
That's right. I used to be in the animation business as or just whatever I could get. I used to do some storyboarding. I used to do some animating, some just I would do design if I was hired to do it. Always lower down the totem pole stuff mostly. Although I always enjoyed doing it. I mean, I did small jobs for some bigger companies. I would say I always enjoyed the live music thing a little more though, because it's just more of an in-person experience is the only way I can say it. Just the feeling of playing, whether they like you or not, just that feeling of being around other people and
Right.
a big group of new people. I started out playing solo piano when I was only 19 at a place called the Manhattan Inn, which is long gone, and I kind of got hooked on that mystique right away. And then when I got my first animation jobs, I was either always alone freelancing from some room, or even if I went to a studio, everybody had their headphones on. You weren't supposed to talk to other people because you were
Hmm.
stopping them from doing their job. So
Hmm.
it just wasn't as fun to me. Probably the funnest part about it was that I grew up in New York City, and a lot of my older art teachers had worked for places like Terry Tunes and famous
Oh,
studios or things like that. A lot of those guys sadly have passed away now, but part of what really made that fun for me was getting to meet some of those guys and take
Hmm.
influence. And a lot of them liked music too. That was another thing I would find. A lot of them
sure.
either played instruments or they liked ragtime and collected records on their own. There's always parallels there. I'll always talk about, negative space is a big thing. The importance of rests in
Hmm.
music. They're just
Hmm.
like the importance of negative space in a good drawing or a good painting. And yeah,
Yeah.
Lauren could tell you all about painting because she's a fabulous landscape painter.
Yes.
Oh. I like to do Hudson River style landscape painting. Yeah, and it's a. I still have my paintings around, and I sell them occasionally, and it's a lot of fun. I do think, speaking of art and music, I do think there's a lot of connection between the two.
But I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Probably was talking about, like, there really is. I think philosophically, I think with all art forms, a lot of it comes down to, you know, confronting ourselves and expressing ourselves. And a lot of it, there's the same themes, let's put it that way, in being a musician and being a painter and, being a performer. It's all hand in hand, I would say, more so than people realize. There's a lot of similarities.
Right, just that whole concept of choosing what you want to express about yourself through your art and how you choose to express that.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, I'm a writer, so I kind of get it. I'm not a musician,
yeah,
but
Yeah, well, that's another. I mean, that's just another extremely important art form. I love to read all kinds of fiction and nonfiction, everything, and that's a completely another very relative art form too. And what do you choose to express about yourself through your writing and how that plays into it too.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Uh, I'm just trying to think again. Oh, well, I guess we should get to Miss Maybell. We haven't talked too much about how you started all that. I know that basically you met at a jam session and you connected right away. You found that you had similar interests. So, how did it sort of progress from there? How did you decide to do an act together?
Well, it was very natural because, we met at a jam session. It was like, kind of more, I would say, traditional jazz session. And I just remember, Charlie had very much a touch for the old style. And honestly, the first time we went to the jam on the way home, we were like talking about Henry Burr on the subway, and we were
Well,
talking
doesn't
about,
everybody?
I know, I know. And so I was just like, and I don't know, it was just like, it was literally instant. I mean, like I said, it was like on the subway home, we were talking about music. I knew I had some gigs that had to be booked. I needed a pianist for some gigs coming up, and so I was like, are you available? Like, I think that night I asked him if he's available for some of these gigs. Then literally that's how it started. It was pretty instant. And I think it was like, I think we both, I don't know, we just both knew, this is what we want to do.
Right.
And this
And
was,
yeah,
and quickly too, we realized, we wanted to do obscure songs. We didn't just want to do the straight ahead jazz songs
right. And
because
she had,
that's a lot I will be
oh
honest,
yeah,
in New York City. If you're a jazz band, it's like everyone just, there's like the standard of jazz songs. And it's like,
hmm,
you can kind of fall into a thing, I think, where you just do those songs that everybody does. And
right.
it's like,
And a lot of the bands in New York don't even play with sheet music because they're all just doing the same tunes, no matter who the sidemen are, and no matter who the vocalist is. There's just a lot of the same kind of a thing, which is fine. I don't want to be mean about it, but we really wanted to do
like
deeper,
unique, obscure
and
songs.
especially just do a lot of lesser done stuff from the ragtime era and from the
Hmm.
20s too. And she had a lot of confidence about it, which made me really happy because I myself am not a singer, which always, when I started playing piano in bars when I was younger, it always made me a harder sell because I don't sing. And also the way I play is very barrel house, especially when I was younger. I've gone to a classical teacher I really love for several years now, who's helped me a lot. But I played very heavy-handed kind of barrel house ragtime when I was younger, and I was lucky to have a couple of gigs that I did. But in the years before I met Miss Maybell, I was having a harder time getting people to book me, because the style I played was very esoteric. A lot of people want kind of background music for quiet French and Italian restaurants and
Right.
stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it was a hard
Yeah,
sell the way I
that's like,
played. And I was even starting to, I would call it sell out and then just try to play more kind of easygoing cocktail piano and stuff just because I needed to work. And, when I met Miss Maybell, she really wanted to go all in and do this obscure ragtime material. And that's what I really wanted to do too. But I was really afraid because I was like, oh, I don't know. I've been trying to push this stuff on people for years and it's kind of just a hard sell. But, to my luck, Miss Maybell is extremely charming and
oh, please.
versatile and much more so than me on my own. And, it really helped that we made a good combo there.
Yeah. I meant to ask you where the name Miss Maybell came from.
Well, I collect Maybell banjos and
Oh,
ukulele, and Maybell was a banjo company from like the I guess late tens, 20s, and early 30s, and then they just like went out of business. And so I collect a bunch of Maybell instruments, and it just kind of started to become a thing where I was just like, oh, I'm Miss Maybell. It was like joking, and then it was like, oh, that's kind of catchy, isn't it? And I couldn't use my own name because, first of all, my last name, like, no one can pronounce it. And I also like the feeling of having a stage name. It feels
yeah.
fun and it feels like, I don't know, it feels fun to just have a stage name and I enjoy it. So maybe I should change my name. I don't know. Officially with like New York State.
Oh, I'm sure you can.
I know.
Uh, so my impression is that your work really kicked off during the pandemic. Is that right? Because I know you did a lot of videos at home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
During
probably. I guess
we
so.
first started to play together around November of 2018.
Okay,
So
so that's
we
before.
had been playing for about a year and a half by the time the pandemic started. And what really happened with the pandemic was we took the opportunity. We've been doing some more obscure material in that initial year and a half we were together, but in reality, we were thrown together very quickly. Like I said, when we met on the train, she was already offering me gigs because she already had gigs that she had to fill.
Hmm.
And we rehearsed together, but we kind of just like a lot of jazz musicians, you just get thrown together on a gig and you kind of just have to sink or
I mean, we
swim.
were always still doing old
Oh
repertoire,
yeah, always,
like, but we were
always.
just
But
doing more popular old repertoire. And,
yeah,
over the course, and we would do some obscure stuff in there, but definitely during the pandemic, it was like,
it gave us a chance to
an
learn,
opportunity,
yeah, to
yeah,
fill out our
to,
repertoire to be almost exclusively obscure material, which
hmm
was a lot of fun. We had 3 or 4 months where we couldn't gig, all the restaurants were shut down, there was no vaccine, et cetera, et cetera. So that
hmm
just gave us a chance to learn all this obscure material, make videos of it, and also, we hadn't really been making many videos prior to that either. We were kind of
Right.
just doing live gigs in the city, so kind of only people in the city knew us. And we were doing a lot of background gigs too. We hadn't got our foot in the door at Birdland yet, or a lot of the more, respectable listening room places we play now. So, COVID gave us that chance to fill out our repertoire, get our name outside the city a little bit. And then when we came back to doing live gigs, we kind of had a whole new repertoire together and we could kind
hmm
of change it,
yeah.
which I'm very excited about. And we've
We
been
were
sticking with.
grateful. Yeah, we were grateful. I mean, for just that time to practice.
Oh yeah. At the time, it seemed we didn't know what the heck was going on. I remember it felt like an odd experience to practice during the pandemic because it felt like, I'm learning this song, I'm refining this song, but who's going to hear it? What am I going to do with it?
Right.
Right.
And, the whole thing of people doing live streams and videos, quickly came together at that time. And thank God for it because it was a great way to keep active and keep your name out there during those, troubling months.
hmm
But
Yeah.
yeah, it wound up being kind of a blessing in disguise because we haven't had anything, like that since. We're always busy doing our live gigs, and we're also always busy with other superficial things like booking our gigs, booking sidemen to play with us. We're always busy, and we have to work really sweat to squeeze in time to learn new material in addition to all this other gigging and
hmm
booking and other little thing week by week things we have to do.
Right. Well, and as I said, your YouTube channel was how I found you, and if you hadn't been doing those videos, then you wouldn't be here. So there you
Right,
go.
right, exactly. Yeah, it's
And
been a
and I'm
really
sure doing this show is the peak of your career right now.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We love though doing the YouTube videos and stuff. It's
Oh
it's
yes.
it's a fun thing, and we've been starting to go live on YouTube. Not playing music live on YouTube, but just doing little shows where we play.
Kind of show and tell.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
play records and talk about history and show
Show
some
sheet music
funny toys and sheet music. It's a lot of fun, yeah.
and
Sure.
chat with whoever comes online. Maybe even show off some other things
Well,
like our
some
vintage
of our
cars.
buddies come on
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look out for the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you how you select your material. That's another thing.
Well, I think like for both of us, we're looking uh well, I don't know if you know about this, but we've been working on this project of unrecorded songs.
Yes, I contributed
Um,
to the funding.
Oh, thank you
oh,
very
thank
much.
you so much. I
Yeah,
mean, it's been a really fun process.
right.
So
That kind of happened naturally because we've just, when we look for sheet music, it's often we're looking for songs to do, but often we're just looking for songs that, that look interesting in one way or another. And we just started to find more and more when we were out collecting vintage sheet music that we're finding all these songs from little publishers outside of New York City, and we would Google them and go into the discography of American historical recordings or
Right.
I-78s or other databases like that, and we would find like, oh wow, it seems like this song has never been recorded before, and we just kept finding that over and over, and it's kind of not surprising because in the 1900s, 1890s, there was no radio yet. There was, I know a lot of people, even though there were records, a lot of people didn't own their own home machines yet. It seems to me that a lot of people just it just seems like in those days there was somebody in every American family that knew how to play piano or banjo or something like that, and people just learned new songs that way, just from getting sheet music and just singing them around the house. And people knew that, and because of that, a lot of songs were published that just didn't make it to that second step of being recorded. Like I know that
Mm-hmm.
the measure of a song's success was not determined from record sales until they say after 1919 or so. Prior to that, it had a lot more to do with sheet music. So it's not surprising that there's so many of these great songs out there that were published but not recorded, probably just performed, locally or something like that for a small period of time, and then sadly just totally forgotten. So
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, we deliberately look for things that have not been recorded before to do. Some of that has been actually even things that were never even published.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky to have our good friend David Sager, who's a great trombone player and vocalist, and he works for the Library of Congress, and he's been helping us find things from the Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, we're getting to the point where we have the repertoire. We feel like for the most part, about 90-95% of it, and we're getting ready to
Mm-hmm.
go into the studio now and record our album. And
Mm-hmm.
probably after that album, we'll start mixing it up a little bit, and we might learn some things that are recorded. Prior to this album starting, we would also, hear cylinders or 78s of songs and say, "Oh, that's a great tune. We should do that one." So we would get songs to perform from records too before the unrecorded songs
But
thing really
I
took
should
off.
say though that when if you come see us live, we do a mix
Yeah, we do
of
a mix.
unrecorded songs and recorded songs.
Sure.
Right.
But for our upcoming album, we're very narrowly, which has been the most fulfilling project,
Yeah.
just finding these unrecorded songs. And it's quite interesting. We rule out everything, a YouTube performance, a MIDI file,
Any
um,
kind of a recording. I
any
know
kind
that's
of
I know
recording.
that's a little extreme. Like we were talking to our producer Brian Wright of Rivermont Records about this, and he was actually kind of laughing at the fact that I considered things like music box rolls and MIDI files to be recordings. Not everybody considers those to be quote unquote legitimate recordings, but we really just want these songs to be just things people haven't been exposed to in any way unless they
Mm-hmm.
happen to maybe be sheet music collectors that also play a little piano and have poked through the songs themselves. We just want this
Nice.
when this record comes out, this to just be a totally new experience for someone to be hearing these songs, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So, do you know yet when the album is coming out?
Hopefully
Um,
by the end of the year. We're going into the studio
Oh
soon.
yeah, I mean it should be we're supposed to be recording in
Spring and summer.
I would say the end of April.
Yeah,
In May we're going to be recording, and so we should have the tracks to the plant by early summer. And so really we should have theoretically we should have the records out around autumn time.
hopefully by the end of the year. Yeah,
Sometimes the record plants take a while
yeah,
for vinyl, but that's the only thing that I think will set it back. We have been playing these songs for almost years now, these
yeah,
unrecorded songs. So it's some of them are, with our band, we've been playing them a lot. So it's
yeah. They are going to be arranged slightly differently than the way we do them on gigs. Sometimes gigs are sometimes live performances call for something a little different than what a record calls for, I would say. When you're performing live, sometimes you're up against a lot of superficial things like audience members talking and just people in the kitchen making noise and stuff like that. And
mm-hmm,
because of that, the arrangements just have to be a little different to accommodate for that. Whereas on a
Right.
record, you can have a lot more going on under the vocal maybe and just mix it down a little bit the way you couldn't do as easily on a live performance, things like that. So
mm-hmm,
but we have been breaking the material in, getting a lot of advice from the guys in our band. Again, Dan Levinson, Andy Stein, Brian Nalepka, they're all guys that really love this music and have played it for a very long time. They're all collectors of things like records and sheet music on their own, and they all really have a deep love of this music the way we do. So we really like to bring these songs. Hey guys, what do you think of this one? What do you think of that one? And get their
mm-hmm,
input on
mm-hmm.
what do you think? Should we do something different with this one?
Yeah.
That's been a fun part of the process as well.
Right. Well, good luck with it. I have an autographed copy coming, so I look
Oh,
forward to
Yay,
it.
I know, we're
well,
very
look forward to
excited.
signing it for you.
What's that?
Oh, we're going to look forward to signing it for you. Believe me.
Thank you. Let me just check my notes on my phone here and see, because I've gone through a lot of questions. I want to see if I overlooked anything. Sorry, do you have something you can talk about to fill in here while I'm looking?
Oh, no problem. One other thing I would say when you were asking before about where we get our material from, one thing we really try to do is just avoid songs in general that other groups we know of are doing. And that's another thing with New York. You get into this kind of thing where a lot of the groups are passing the same material around and playing it. And, I don't want to look down my nose at that or anything. I know there's benefits to that in terms of just being practical and also just in terms of, fun. But, we really try to do material that, whether it was recorded or not, that nobody else is really doing, especially in the city. So that's just another key
It's been
ingredient,
a
I would
fun
say.
process. And
Yeah.
because I do think too, it forces us, and this goes back to the unrecorded songs as well, you know, it allows us a freedom of expression of the song.
Right.
Even when you're learning the song from a recording, you can't help but adapt yourself to whatever that singer was doing.
Right. Or fall back on it. Like if you
Hmm.
learn a song from Lee
And
Mills.
yeah, and so basically, it's important to have your own freedom of expression in the song, and it's that's really the best way to have your own interpretation of it.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of forces you to have your own interpretation, which is kind of a really fun. It's both fun and a challenge, we find.
Yeah. So there's just a couple other questions I had, and yeah, you mentioned collecting sheet music and collecting records, and again, I can relate to that because I'm a collector myself. Are there certain things that you look for? Is there like a holy grail of sheet music that you've been trying to find for years, or something like that, or do you pretty much just take whatever's around?
That's interesting. I mean, for me, it's really about the song. I mean, probably Charlie has different criteria, but for me personally, I think it's dependent on the song itself. Like for example, we recently um, were able to look through David Jason's old sheet music collection,
Hmm.
and which was for sale. And so we purchased a song called Tennessee. And at first look, I had a feeling it was going to be a good song. When we played through it, I was like, oh my God, this is such a great song. What a classic, great song. And, that's really the holy grail is when you find a great, great song. And
Right.
it happens. It happens. And I'm sure
Yeah.
Charlie has maybe a similar or different criteria.
Well, yeah, we tend to mostly collect things for practical reasons, meaning we're looking for inclusion in our sets. But there are some things that we collect, I guess you could say, for more vanity reasons. Like there's certain stage stars of your, for instance, Clarice Vance, who we were talking about earlier. We
Right.
have a big collection of sheet music with Clarice Vance on it. I would say anything with her on it we'll buy, whether we're going to do the song or not.
Hmm.
There's certain other stage stars of that time. We like to collect sheets that have Emma Karis on them, and there's
Hmm.
certain other performers we're kind of interested for that way. And so, sometimes composers too. There's certain composers who I really have an affinity for. Like if I see something by Uday L. Bowman or Mose Gumbel or certain other ragtime people I'm really just interested in, or early jazz, people like Rube Bloom that I really like. If I'll buy something with their name on it if it comes up, just because I treasure their music a lot, whether or not I'm going to learn the piece right away or not, or ever in some cases. Sometimes you just like the way something looks.
Right.
But I would say in general, we probably mostly collect sheet music for practical purposes of looking for material.
Yeah, I guess just speaking for myself, there are certain records that I would look for like 10 years before I found a copy of them and that kind of
Right.
thing. So,
Oh, and as
uh,
far as records goes, there's definitely holy grail things that we're
Mm.
looking for. But I know I myself, we have a lot of 78s, and we've even started to collect cylinders. But I'm always just happy to hear things. Like if I can hear some rare, newly unearthed brown wax cylinder, to me it almost doesn't matter if I can own it or hear it in person, or if I
I
could just hear somebody
78
else's. Yeah, I 78s has
has
been
been
an
such
amazing.
a great resource for us
Right.
to to learn songs and
And also just
have access to songs that we could never own, really,
right. I would
because they'd
say
be either way too expensive or way too rare.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say sometimes another great benefit of studying these old records, sometimes we're not just looking for material. Sometimes we're looking for to learn performance style and apply it to other songs. Like you
Right.
might really like a certain bag of tricks that a certain singer does, cracking their voice in an artistic way, or other little tricks that they do. And you might want to study all their records and apply a little bit of what they do, maybe to another song that they sang on the stage but didn't
Mhm.
record, which tends to happen a lot.
Mhm.
You'll find singers like again like Clarice Vance. Clarice Vance, sang probably hundreds of songs and was on dozens of pieces of sheet music, but they're not all things she recorded. But a fun challenge can be to take a piece she sang on the stage but didn't record, and then study the intricacies of her vocal performances from songs she did record, and then try to apply those little tricks and vocalisms to this song of hers that she never recorded, but we know she performed. That can be a fun
Right.
little we'll try to do too. And I'll try to do the same thing with piano music too. You can say, hey, I know how this piano player played. I can take this piece that he played but never recorded and try to play it exactly the way I know he would have played it from his piano rolls or his records. That's another fun little challenge.
Yeah,
Right.
we actually, one of the unrecorded songs we found is a Clarence Williams song, which
Right.
is a
That's a great
very rare
example.
song. It was never even published. We got it through it was only copyrighted. We got it through the Library of Congress. And obviously, we are familiar with Clarence Williams' other songs. We're also familiar with how he kind of the sound he would get from his band,
Right. And the way he played
and
piano.
how the singers that he would accompany, how they would work.
Right.
And so it's that that's another process where we can kind of try to adapt that style to the unrecorded song to kind of give as much appreciation to the writer as possible.
Right. So I just have a couple more questions and then I'll let you go. But just another thing about touring. Do you have a favorite gig that you've done? Was there a particular night when the audience was really with you or anything like that?
Oh, that's
Well,
a good
like I said,
question.
the show in Spain was very special. The shows we did in Switzerland were very special. In terms
Birdland.
yeah, in terms of the gigs in the city, it's
Yeah.
always special to perform at Birdland.
Sure.
I do a series for 34th Street Partnership in Bryant Park in the city once a week for a year. Once a year for a week every year. And the people that come to those performances are really very special patrons of the arts and very sweet people that really look forward to seeing us every year. Miss Maybell always closes out the series with me every year. We look forward to that too. In terms of other things on the road, the Ragtime Extravaganza in
That was
Michigan
a lot of fun.
last year was a lot of
We
fun. We got
played with their orchestra, which
yeah,
was the River Raisin Ragtime Review
mm-hmm.
band orchestra. So we got to play with their orchestra, which was really fun. And there was a huge crowd, and there was fireworks. It was a lot of fun. It was a beautiful summer night. I mean, really, I have to be honest, we're very lucky. We've had almost there's too many good shows. We've
Right.
had so many good shows.
I'm
Another one
sure.
we really like is the West Coast Ragtime
Yeah, the West
Festival
Coast Ragtime
and
Festival
the
is
Sutter
always
Creek
fun, and
Ragtime
the Sutter
Festival.
Creek
We
Ragtime
play those
Festival.
most years, but those are both in California, and those are run by some really talented and really sweet and devoted people who just devote their entire lives to keeping ragtime music alive. And if you're ever in California, I definitely recommend checking out both those festivals, not just to see us, but also to see all the other talented performers they have every year.
It's
It's
just a
really,
fun festival
yeah,
where ragtime is really
I
appreciated.
know you get to just be totally immersed in it. It really feels like stepping back in time because you're just hearing it continuously all day long from many different performers all at once. It really makes it
It's
feel
special.
modern day again in a special way to go to a festival like that.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't mention that I used to be an actor, so I'm not a
Oh,
musician, but
Oh,
I'm used to, I have some experience with audience response, and I wasn't as successful in my work as you guys have been, but I do know what it's like to be in front of an audience, so I have some of that. Uh, just
well,
thought
you
I'd
got to
mention
get back at it. You got to get
it.
back at it.
Well, I'm terrible at auditioning, so I stopped getting parts after a while, and then I just fell into the teaching thing, and I've been a teacher, so I kind of prefer that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was when I was in the animation business too. There was a lot of that kind of a thing of just of testing, 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 testing for jobs. And it's not as much like that in the music world. It's kind of like, either they get you or they don't. It's a little bit more common sense. So I like that kind of a thing a lot too. The whole thing of auditioning over and over again always kind of has bugged me too.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, just in closing, I should ask you to plug your upcoming gigs. I know you still have a few shows on your tour, so tell
Yep.
the folks
Well,
where you're going to be.
we have a big show at Birdland on June 15th,
Hmm.
which is Father's Day, and it's at 5:30 in Birdland in New York City with our full band. We're going to have Andy Stein on violin, Brian Alepka on bass, Dan Levinson on reeds, Gavin on banjo, Charlie and me, of course, and we're going to be playing all of our favorite songs. And it's, yeah, bring dad to go see Ragtime. It's Father's Day.
That's right. And you can always check out our videos on YouTube. I really recommend, especially if you can't see us in the city. And always you can give us a follow on social media. We always do, smaller week by week gigs, like pretty much all the time. Again, Birdland is really the one to come to if you're coming to the city or for a
Yep,
special thing.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of intimidated about doing this and meeting you guys, but it's really been a pleasure. And as I
Oh,
say, I've been a
Oh
fan,
yeah.
and I think you guys are terrific. And as I said, if you're ever around Philly, then I'm there. So I hope.
oh my
Thank you so
God.
much,
Wow. Well,
Andrew.
if you know any places, let us know. We'd love to come. Yeah.
Well, I'll try. I'll look around and recommend you. So I
Awesome.
Cool.
Sounds good to me. We'll be there.
okay. I hope we can meet in person sometime. So
Of
Absolutely.
course, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
likewise. Thank you so much for having us on your show.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
All
Thank you.
righty. Well, take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.